Welcome to Forbiddenlovestorychannel, where secrets unravel and hearts collide. I never imagined I'd find myself teetering on the edge of something so reckless, so forbidden. New Orleans, the sultry, jazz-soaked city of mystery and revelry, was supposed to be my sanctuary, a place to stitch up the fraying threads of my marriage to Daniel. At 32, I'd convinced myself this trip would rekindle the fading embers of our love, a desperate bid to rediscover the vibrant, carefree woman I'd buried beneath years of routine. But fate, cruel and capricious, had other plans. When Daniel told me his uncle, James, would be joining us, my stomach twisted with a flicker of unease. I masked it with a tight smile, my voice trembling as I asked, "Why now?" I thought this was our time. Daniel, oblivious as always, wrapped his arms around me, his warmth familiar yet distant. "I know, Chris, but James hasn't been back to New Orleans in years. He's been lonely since Aunt Clara passed. He won't get in our way, you'll see. He's chill like that." Chill. That word clung to me, heavy with irony. I knew James too well, his quiet strength, his weathered charm. At 55, he carried an air of effortless confidence, a man who'd seen the world and tamed it with a steady gaze. My heart thudded traitorously at the thought of him, a rhythm I couldn't silence. We arrived in New Orleans on a humid afternoon, the air thick with the scent of magnolias and the distant wail of a saxophone. James was waiting in the hotel lobby, his tall frame leaning casually against the wall. He looked rugged yet refreshed, his salt and pepper hair catching the light, his dark eyes glinting with something unreadable. "New Orleans has always had a pulse," he said, striding toward me. His voice, low and gravelly, sent a shiver racing down my spine. He leaned in, brushing a kiss against my cheek, and murmured, "I think you'll feel it too, Christine." My cheeks flared hot, a flush I couldn't hide. His presence loomed, magnetic and unsettling, stirring a restless ache I hadn't felt in years. Daniel, buzzing with excitement, barely noticed my faltering composure. "We've got to hit Bourbon Street tonight," he exclaimed, his boyish grin lighting up his face. "And maybe the Garden District tomorrow. Get some of that old Southern vibe." I nodded absently, my eyes darting to James. He flashed a sly, knowing smile that made my breath hitch. "Why rush into the tourist traps?" he countered, his tone smooth as velvet. "I could show you the hidden corners, the real New Orleans, places that breathe secrets." Daniel clapped him on the shoulder, eager as a puppy. "Hell yeah, let's do it!" And so we set off, wandering through the French Quarter's labyrinth of cobblestone streets. Daniel bounded ahead, snapping photos of wrought-iron balconies and street musicians, while James lingered beside me. His presence was a quiet storm, electric and inescapable. He didn't say much at first, just walked with that easy swagger. But every so often his arm brushed mine, a fleeting, searing touch that jolted me awake. My pulse raced, wild and unruly, as if my body knew something my mind refused to admit. At one point, he leaned in close, his breath warm against my ear. "Do you crave adventure, Christine?" His voice was a whisper, daring and intimate. I stumbled, caught off guard, my tongue tripping over itself. Yeah, sure," I managed, forcing a shaky smile. "Who doesn't?" His eyes sparkled with mischief, a glint that pierced through me. "Then why not take a chance? See this city through my eyes, the untamed, raw side of it." He winked, and that mysterious grin of his sent a tremor through me, igniting a thrill I hadn't known I'd been starving for. I glanced at Daniel, still oblivious, his laughter echoing as he bartered with a street vendor. He didn't see the silent exchange, the way James's gaze lingered on me, heavy with unspoken promises. My lips betrayed me, curling into a smile I couldn't suppress. It was reckless, intoxicating, a spark flaring to life in the humid dusk. We pressed on through the quarter, the air alive with the clink of glasses and the soulful strum of guitars. With every step, I felt something shift inside me, a restless tide rising, pulling me toward James. His shoulder grazed mine as we turned a corner, his hand brushing my lower back to guide me through a crowd. Each touch was fleeting, innocent on the surface, but it seared into me, branding my skin with a longing I couldn't name. We paused outside a dimly lit jazz club, the mournful wail of a trumpet spilling into the street. James leaned closer, his voice dropping to a husky murmur. "This city's full of secrets, Christine, temptations around every corner. Are you ready for them?" My heart pounded, a frantic drumbeat drowning out the music. I could barely choke out a reply, my voice a fragile whisper. "I think I am." His gaze locked onto mine, intense and unyielding, peeling back layers I'd kept hidden even from myself. In that moment, I knew we were teetering on the edge of something dangerous, something forbidden. Daniel, still lost in his own world, called out to us, "Hey, come check this out." But I barely heard him. The evening stretched before me, drenched in a new, trembling anticipation. I wasn't sure I could stop what was beginning to unfurl in my heart, and worse, I wasn't sure I wanted to. The streets of New Orleans pulsed with life, a sultry symphony of laughter, clinking glasses, and the mournful cry of trumpets weaving through the humid air. Each day unfurled like a fevered dream, and with every step, I felt the invisible thread between James and me tighten, pulling me deeper into a current I couldn't resist. Daniel, my anchor. My husband drifted ahead, lost in the city's charm, snapping photos, sipping hurricanes, planning our next stop with boyish glee. He didn't see the storm brewing beneath my skin, the way my pulse quickened whenever James drew near. I tried to bury it, to smother the flickering ember of desire with guilt, but it only blazed hotter, wilder, threatening to consume me whole. Our days blurred into a dizzying dance of exploration. We wandered the Garden District, its sprawling oaks dripping with Spanish moss, their shadows stretching across the cracked sidewalks like secrets waiting to be whispered. Daniel chattered about the architecture, his voice bright and oblivious, while James lingered at my side, his presence a quiet thunder. He'd point out hidden courtyards or lean close to murmur tales of the city's haunted past, his words wrapping around me like velvet, soft yet suffocating. Every glance he stole, every brush of his fingers against mine as we passed a basket of beignets or a map ignited a shiver that raced down my spine. I told myself it was nothing, a fleeting thrill, but my heart thrummed a different truth, loud and insistent. One afternoon, as the sun dipped low, painting the sky in hues of amber and crimson, we found ourselves in Jackson Square. The air buzzed with the chatter of fortune-tellers and the strum of a lone guitarist, the scent of chicory coffee mingling with the faint tang of the Mississippi River. Daniel darted off to haggle with a street artist, leaving me alone with James beneath the shadow of St. Louis Cathedral. He stood closer than he should have, his shoulder grazing mine, his breath stirring the hair at my temple. "This place has a soul, Christine," he said, his voice low and rough, like gravel smoothed by whiskey. "It pulls you in, makes you feel things you didn't know you could." I swallowed hard, my throat dry, my chest tightening as his gaze pierced through me. Dark, searching, relentless. I managed a shaky laugh, brushing a strand of hair from my face. "It's overwhelming, that's for sure." But it wasn't the city overwhelming me. It was him. He stepped nearer, closing the gap until I could feel the heat radiating from him, a magnetic pull that made my knees tremble. "Sometimes," he whispered, his lips curling into that dangerous lopsided smile, "you've got to let go and see where it takes you." My breath hitched, caught in the space between us, and for a fleeting moment I imagined leaning into him, letting that current sweep me away. But Daniel's laughter broke the spell, echoing from across the square as he waved us over. I stepped back, flustered, my cheeks burning, and James's eyes glinted with something unspoken, a promise, a dare. That evening, we boarded a steamboat for a twilight cruise down the Mississippi. The river stretched wide and dark, its surface shimmering with the reflected glow of the city's lights. Daniel perched at the railing, snapping photos of the paddle wheel churning the water, his excitement infectious yet distant. I stood near the edge, the cool breeze tugging at my hair when James appeared beside me. He didn't say anything at first, just watched the horizon, his silhouette sharp against the fading sunset. Then he turned, his voice cutting through the hum of the boat's engine. "Ever wonder what it'd be like to be free, Christine? Really free?" His words landed like stones in my chest, heavy and stirring, unearthing a longing I'd buried deep. I glanced at him, my heart pounding, a frantic drumbeat against my ribs. "Free from what?" I asked, though I knew the answer, knew it in the way my skin prickled under his gaze, in the way my fingers twitched to reach for him. He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a husky murmur. "From everything holding you back, expectations, rules, the things you think you should feel." His eyes locked onto mine, fierce and unyielding, stripping me bare. I couldn't look away, couldn't breathe, as if he'd hooked something wild inside me and was reeling it to the surface. The boat rocked gently, and his hand brushed mine, light, accidental, yet deliberate enough to send a jolt through me, electric and searing. I froze, my lips parting, but no words came. He pointed to the shore, his fingers lingering near mine, tracing the air between us. "See that light over there? Old plantation house, got stories that'd chill your blood." His voice was a distraction, a flimsy shield, but his touch lingered in my mind, branding me with a hunger I couldn't shake. Our eyes met, and in that unguarded moment, I saw it. The same restless fire mirrored in his stare, a flame feeding off my own. Days melted into nights, each one thicker with tension, heavier with the weight of what we weren't saying. We strolled through the French market one morning, the air ripe with the scent of crawfish and spices, Daniel haggling over a trinket, while James and I lingered by a stall of dusty books. He picked up a leather-bound volume, his fingers tracing the cracked spine, and leaned close. "You like stories, Christine." His breath grazed my ear, warm and tantalizing, stirring a flush that crept up my neck. "Love them," I whispered, avoiding his eyes, my voice trembling. "Especially the old ones, they pull you somewhere else." He smiled, slow and deliberate, a predator sizing up its prey. "New Orleans is one big story, twisted, beautiful, dangerous, just like us." My heart stuttered, a frantic bird trapped in its cage. I wanted to laugh it off, to step away, but his words coiled around me, tight and unyielding, drawing me in. Daniel returned, oblivious, clutching a carved alligator, and the moment shattered. But the thread between James and me only tightened, tugging harder with every stolen glance, every whispered word. Then came the night that broke me open. We'd wandered to the edge of the quarter after dinner, the streets quieter, the air thick with the promise of rain. Daniel, weary from the day, yawned and stretched, his voice soft with exhaustion. "I'm beat, Chris. Heading back to the hotel. You coming?" I hesitated, my chest tightening, a restless ache clawing at me. "I'll stay a bit," I said, forcing a casual tone. "The night's too pretty to waste." He kissed my forehead, his lips warm and trusting, and ambled off, leaving me alone with James on a balcony overlooking the river. The silence between us crackled, charged and alive. James watched me, his eyes glinting in the dim glow of a street lamp, a hunter's gaze. "Didn't want to go, huh?" he asked, stepping closer, his voice a low rumble that vibrated through me. I shook my head, my throat tight. It's too alive out here." He smirked, a spark of triumph in his eyes, and offered his hand. "Walk with me." My fingers trembled as they met his, a spark igniting at the contact, fierce and unstoppable. We drifted into the night, the distant hum of jazz fading as we crossed the moonwalk, the river's edge shimmering under a crescent sky. He stopped by the railing, the Mississippi lapping below, and turned to me, his face shadowed, yet vivid with intensity. "Ever feel like something's missing, Christine?" His question pierced me, sharp and unerring, unearthing a void I'd ignored too long. "What do you mean?" I breathed, my voice fragile, teetering on the edge. He stepped closer, his hands framing my waist, his touch firm yet tender, something real, something that shakes you awake. His eyes burned into mine, dark and fathomless, and I felt my resolve crumble, a dam breaking under the flood of his nearness. "James," I whispered, my voice cracking, "this is wrong." But my protest sounded hollow, drowned by the roar of my own longing. He tilted his head, his lips hovering near mine, his breath hot and unsteady. Wrong or terrifying? I couldn't answer, couldn't think, as his hand slid up my arm, leaving a trail of fire. The world shrank to the space between us, the air thick with anticipation, electric with need. Then he kissed me. Soft at first, tentative, then fierce and claiming, his lips crashing into mine like a wave breaking the shore. I melted into him, my hands clutching his shirt, surrendering to the storm I'd fought so hard to deny. When I pulled back, gasping, the world spun, fractured and remade. "No," I rasped, stepping away, my heart a tangled mess of ecstasy and dread. This wasn't supposed to happen. James held my gaze, steady and unapologetic. "But it did, Christine, and we both felt it." His words anchored me, a lifeline in the chaos. And as we stood there, the river whispering below, I knew I'd crossed a line I couldn't uncross, a line that would unravel everything I'd ever known. The days in New Orleans stretched taut, a fragile thread trembling under the weight of what James and I had unleashed. That kiss by the river lingered on my lips like a phantom burn, searing and indelible, haunting me with every breath. I tried to shove it down, to drown it in the clatter of the French Quarter's revelry, but it clawed its way back, sharp, insistent, alive. Daniel moved through our vacation with his usual buoyancy, planning riverboat dinners and cemetery tours, his laughter ringing bright against the city's sultry hum. But I was a shadow trailing behind, my heart a tangled knot of guilt and yearning, unravelling with every sidelong glance James threw my way. We played our parts, James and I, a masquerade of normalcy stitched together with forced smiles and careful distance. At breakfast in the hotel's courtyard, surrounded by the scent of jasmine and the clink of coffee cups, I'd catch his eyes across the table, dark, smouldering, a silent pull that made my stomach twist. He'd pass the sugar, his fingers brushing mine for a fleeting, electric second, and I'd flinch, heat flooding my cheeks. Daniel, absorbed in his eggs, Benedict, didn't notice the way my breath hitched or how James's gaze lingered, heavy with unspoken words. I hated myself for it, the thrill, the betrayal, but I couldn't stop. It was a current dragging me under, relentless and intoxicating. The tension thickened with each passing hour, a storm brewing beneath the surface. We wandered through the Garden District one humid afternoon, the air sticky with the promise of rain, the oaks whispering overhead. Daniel snapped photos of antebellum mansions, his voice bubbling with excitement, while James walked beside me, his presence a quiet roar. He'd murmur about the city's history, tales of voodoo queens and lost loves, his voice low and deliberate, threading through me like silk. Every word felt like a secret meant only for me, a tether pulling me closer even as I fought to stay afloat. My hands trembled when he handed me a bottle of water, his touch igniting a shiver I couldn't hide. I'd glance at Daniel, praying he didn't see the flush creeping up my neck, the way my resolve crumbled under James's steady stare. Nights were worse, the city's pulse amplifying my restless ache. We'd sit on a balcony overlooking Bourbon Street, the neon glow bathing us in flickering light, the air thick with the tang of spilled beer and the wail of a saxophone. Daniel would lean back, sipping a Sazerac, recounting the day's adventures, while James watched me from the corner of his eye, a predator's patience, a hunter's intent. "You okay, Chris?" Daniel asked once, his brow furrowing as he caught my distracted stare. I forced a smile, my voice brittle. "Just tired. It's been a lot." He nodded, trusting and unaware, while James's lips twitched, a knowing curve that sent a jolt through me. I wanted to scream, to run, but my feet stayed rooted, chained by a desire I couldn't quench. Then came the night that shattered the facade. We'd spent the day exploring the bayou, the murky water lapping at the boat, the cypress trees dripping with moss like silent sentinels. Daniel had been in high spirits, joking with the guide, while I sat beside James, the heat of his thigh pressing against mine through the thin fabric of my dress. His hand rested on the bench, inches from mine, and I felt the pull, magnetic, undeniable. I stared at the water, willing my heart to slow, but it raced, a frantic drumbeat echoing the chaos within. Back at the hotel, Daniel announced he'd meet a college buddy for drinks, his eyes sparkling with anticipation. "I'll be out late, Chris. Don't wait up. Enjoy yourself. Okay." He kissed my cheek, warm and trusting, and left me standing in the lobby, my pulse thundering. The moment he was gone, James texted, "Meet me at Preservation Hall, 9 p.m. My fingers shook as I read it, my chest tightening with a mix of dread and exhilaration. I shouldn't go, I knew it, but my body moved before my mind could protest. I slipped into a sundress, the fabric cool against my fevered skin, and stepped into the night, the streets alive with the clatter of hooves and the hum of voices. Preservation Hall glowed softly, its weathered walls vibrating with the soulful wail of jazz. James waited outside, leaning against a lamppost, his silhouette sharp and commanding. "You came," he said, his voice a low rumble that stirred the air between us. I nodded, my throat dry. "Couldn't stay away." We slipped inside, the music wrapping around us, raw, aching, alive. We didn't speak, just stood close, the crowd pressing us together until I could feel the heat of him, the steady rise of his chest. His hand brushed mine, deliberate this time, and I didn't pull away. The note swelled, a mournful crescendo, and he leaned down, his lips grazing my ear. "Dance with me, Christine." It wasn't a question. His arm slid around my waist, pulling me into the rhythm, our bodies swaying as one. My heart pounded, a wild, untamed thing, and I felt the world slip away. Daniel, the hotel, the life I knew, until it was just us, tangled in the music's embrace. Afterward, we spilled onto the street, the night thick with humidity and promise. He took my hand, his grip firm, and led me toward the river, the Mississippi shimmering under a sliver of moon. We stopped by the levee, the water's whisper mingling with the distant hum of the city. "I can't pretend anymore," he said, turning to me, his eyes blazing with a fire that matched my own. "There's something here, Christine, something real." My breath caught, a fragile gasp as his hands framed my face, warm and steady. "James," I whispered, my voice trembling. "We shouldn't—" But the words dissolved as he kissed me again, fierce and desperate, a collision of need that drowned out every protest. I clung to him, my fingers digging into his shoulders, surrendering to the storm raging within. We pulled apart, breathless, the world spinning around us. "We have to be careful," I murmured, my voice shaky, my lips still tingling. He nodded, his jaw tight. "I know, but I can't stop this. Neither can you." I wanted to argue, to cling to the shred of sanity left, but he was right. The thread had snapped, and we were tumbling into the abyss together. The next morning, Daniel's cheer felt forced, his eyes darting between us as we sat over coffee. "You two were out late," he said, his tone casual but edged with something sharp. I froze, my cup clattering against the saucer. "Just enjoying the city," James replied smoothly, his smile unshaken. "Lost track of time." Daniel's gaze lingered on me, probing, and I forced a nod, my stomach churning. "It was beautiful," I added, my voice thin, brittle. He didn't press, but the air shifted, thicker, heavier, a silent question hanging between us. That evening, we walked along the riverfront, the sun sinking low, casting golden streaks across the water. James and I stayed close, our hands brushing as we passed a vendor selling pralines, the sweet scent cloying in the air. I felt his fingers intertwine with mine, a reckless claim, and my heart soared, reckless and free, until I saw him. Daniel, standing by the ferry landing, his silhouette stark against the fading light. His eyes locked onto our clasped hands, widening with a mix of shock and fury. I yanked my hand free, but it was too late. He stormed toward us, his face pale, his steps pounding the pavement like thunder. "What the hell is this?" he demanded, his voice raw, cracking with betrayal. I opened my mouth, but nothing came. My throat seized, choked by panic. James stepped forward, his voice steady but grave. "Daniel, listen, I know how this looks." "How it looks?" Daniel cut him off, his eyes blazing, his fists clenched. "You're my uncle, James, and you—" He turned to me, his gaze a dagger, piercing through me. "Christine, how could you?" Tears stung my eyes, my lips quivering. "Daniel, I didn't mean—" But he shook his head, his voice breaking into a shout. "Don't, just don't." He staggered back, his face twisting with pain, disgust, rage. "You're both dead to me," he spat, the words venomous, final. Without another glance, he turned and strode away, his figure swallowed by the dusk. I stood frozen, the world crumbling beneath me, the river's whisper mocking my silence. James reached for my hand, but I flinched, my chest heaving with sobs I couldn't release. Daniel was gone, and with him, everything I'd known, shattered by a choice I couldn't take back. When Daniel stormed away into the New Orleans dusk, leaving James and me stranded by the river's edge, a strange, trembling relief washed over me. The mask had shattered, the secret spilled, and for a fleeting moment I felt unshackled, free to breathe, to feel without the suffocating weight of deception. But that freedom came laced with a bitter sting, a hollow ache that gnawed at my core. Daniel's face, twisted with betrayal, his voice raw with pain, haunted me, a ghost I couldn't banish. James's hand found mine, warm and steady, anchoring me as the city's lights blurred through my tears. "We'll figure this out, Christine," he murmured, his tone firm yet tender. "Together." I nodded, clinging to his promise, desperate to believe we could salvage something beautiful from the wreckage. We lingered in New Orleans a few more days, the city's vibrancy now muted, its jazz a mournful echo of what we'd lost. The hotel felt stifling, every corner tainted by memories of Daniel's laughter, his trusting smile. We barely spoke of him, but his absence hung heavy, a silent spectre between us. James suggested we leave, start fresh somewhere quieter, away from the chaos we'd ignited. "A small town," he said one evening, his eyes glinting with resolve as we sat on a bench overlooking the Mississippi. "Just us, a clean slate." My heart fluttered, a fragile mix of hope and dread, and I agreed, yearning to outrun the guilt clawing at my soul. We settled in a sleepy town called Willow Creek, a 2-hour drive from New Orleans, where the air smelled of pine and the streets wound lazily past clapboard houses and sprawling fields. Our new home was modest, a cozy bungalow with a sagging porch, a backyard bursting with wildflowers, and windows that caught the golden spill of sunrise. It felt like a sanctuary, a fragile cocoon where we could rebuild. The first days were a whirlwind of possibility. We painted the walls a soft sage, hung curtains that danced in the breeze, and planted herbs in cracked pots along the windowsill. James brewed coffee each morning, the rich aroma curling through the house while I arranged books on shelves, my fingers tracing their spines as if they could rewrite our story. We moved through those early weeks with a tentative joy, tiptoeing around the edges of our new reality. James would pull me close on the porch swing, his arms a warm fortress, and we'd watch the sky blaze pink and gold, the crickets humming a lullaby. "This is ours, Christine," he'd whisper, his breath tickling my ear, his voice thick with conviction. "No more hiding." I'd nestle into him, my heart swelling with a bittersweet ache, wanting so badly to believe it. We cooked dinners together, simple meals of roasted chicken and buttery cornbread, our laughter filling the kitchen, a fragile melody over the clatter of pans. For a while it felt real, like we'd carved out a space where the past couldn't reach us. But the past is a stubborn shadow, creeping in when you least expect it. At night, alone in our bed, the silence pressed against me, thick and accusing. I'd lie awake, staring at the ceiling, Daniel's wounded eyes flashing in the dark. The guilt was a vice, tightening around my chest, squeezing until I could barely breathe. I'd betrayed him, my husband, my rock, for a flame that had burned too bright, too fast. James sensed it, I think. He'd reach for me in the quiet, his hand finding mine under the sheets, but his touch, once electric, began to feel distant, a bridge I couldn't fully cross. "You okay?" he'd ask, his voice soft but edged with worry. I'd nod, forcing a smile, but the lie hung heavy between us. Willow Creek's stillness amplified the cracks forming beneath our fragile facade. James thrived on order. Early mornings with the newspaper spread across the table, his coffee black and steaming, his days mapped out with precision. I craved chaos, spontaneity, late nights under the stars, impulsive drives to nowhere, anything to shake the numbness settling in my bones. We'd bicker over small things at first, a forgotten dish in the sink, the thermostat set too low, the way he'd stack firewood in rigid piles while I'd scatter it in a careless heap. "Can't you just relax?" I'd snap, my voice sharp with frustration. He'd frown, his jaw tightening. "I'm trying to keep this together, Christine." The word stung, a quiet accusation, and I'd turn away, my throat burning with unshed tears. The disagreements grew, festering like wounds left untended. One evening, as we sat at the kitchen table, the air thick with the scent of garlic and regret, he broke the silence. "I know you want more," he said, his tone weary, his fork hovering over a plate of cooling pasta. "Adventure, excitement, I see it in you, but I can't keep chasing that." His eyes met mine, shadowed and resigned, and I felt my heart clench, a dull, throbbing ache. "It's not about that," I shot back, my voice trembling, rising with a desperate edge. I don't feel alive here. I thought this would be different, James. I thought we'd be happy." He leaned back, his chair creaking, his gaze hardening. "What did you expect? That it'd be easy? That we'd just erase everything and start over like nothing happened?" The question landed like a punch, stealing my breath. I stared at him, my lips parting, but no answer came. Maybe he was right. Maybe I'd been naive, chasing a dream built on sand. The silence stretched, brittle and suffocating, until I pushed my chair back and fled to the porch, the cool night air biting at my skin. I sank onto the swing, my hands trembling, the stars above blurring through a haze of tears. Daniel's face flickered in my mind, his smile, his warmth, and the guilt surged, a tidal wave drowning me in its icy grip. I'd traded him for this, for a love that was starting to feel like a cage. Weeks bled into months, and our home, once a haven, became a battleground of unspoken grievances. James withdrew, his laughter fading, his touches growing rare and mechanical. I'd catch him on the porch, staring into the distance, his shoulders slumped as if carrying a burden he wouldn't share. I felt it too, the emptiness, the loneliness creeping in despite our shared roof. We'd sit across from each other at dinner, the clink of forks against plates the only sound, our conversations shrinking to hollow pleasantries. "Nice day today," he'd say, his voice flat. "Yeah, sunny," I'd reply, my words tasting like ash. The spark that had blazed in New Orleans dimmed, smothered by routine, by the weight of what we'd done. One night, as the wind howled outside, rattling the windows, I couldn't take it anymore. I found him in the living room, a book open in his lap, his eyes distant. "James," I said, my voice cracking, raw with a desperation I couldn't hide. "We need to talk. This isn't working." He looked up, his face etched with fatigue, a quiet sadness pooling in his gaze. "I know," he said simply, setting the book aside. "I feel it too. We're falling apart, aren't we?" The words hit me like a stone, heavy and final, and I nodded, my chest tightening. "I love you," I whispered, tears spilling hot down my cheeks. "But I'm not happy. I thought we could make it, but I feel lost." He stood, crossing the room to pull me into his arms, his embrace warm yet tinged with farewell. "I love you too, Christine," he murmured, his voice thick with emotion. "But maybe we're not meant to be. You deserve more, something I can't give you." I clung to him, my sobs muffled against his chest, the truth slicing through me like a blade. We'd tried. God, we'd tried. But the foundation we'd built was cracked, crumbling under the strain of guilt and difference. "What do we do?" I choked out, my fingers curling into his shirt. He sighed, his breath warm against my hair. "We let go, give ourselves a chance to heal, even if it's apart." We stood there, wrapped in each other's arms, the wind moaning through the trees outside, a mournful chorus to our unravelling. The next day, I packed my things, clothes, books, the little pieces of a life I'd tried to claim. James helped, his hands steady as he folded my sweaters, his silence a quiet goodbye. When I reached the door, suitcase in hand, he stopped me. "Christine," he said, his voice soft, breaking. "I hope you find what you're looking for." I met his eyes, glistening with unshed tears, and nodded, my throat too tight to speak. The door closed behind me, a soft thud echoing in my hollow chest, and I stepped into the unknown, alone, aching, forever marked by what we'd been. When I left James, the bungalow door in Willow Creek clicked shut with a hollow thud, a sound that echoed in my chest like a final goodbye. I stood on the porch, suitcase in hand, the evening air sharp and cold, James's words, "I hope you find what you're looking for," hanging heavy in the stillness. The sky glowed faintly, streaked with grey, and I felt untethered, adrift in a world that no longer made sense. I'd walked away, chasing a vague promise of peace, but all I carried was a gnawing emptiness, a void that swallowed me as I stepped into the unknown. I moved to Elmwood, a quiet town nearby, into a stark apartment with bare walls and a single window framing a cracked parking lot. The air inside was stale, thick with dust, and the silence pressed against me, suffocating and relentless. Boxes cluttered the floor, remnants of a life I'd torn apart, but I couldn't muster the will to unpack. I sank onto the couch, its springs creaking, and stared at the blank ceiling, its faint stains a mirror to my fractured state. This was my fresh start, but it felt like a tomb, cold and uninviting, trapping me with my regrets. The days melted into a blur of solitude. James's absence cut deep. I missed his quiet presence, the clink of his coffee mug, the warmth of his hand brushing mine. Work offered a thin lifeline, a small marketing job where I faked smiles and nodded through chatter, my mind elsewhere. "You okay, Christine?" a co-worker asked, her voice soft with pity. "Just tired," I lied, the words bitter on my tongue. Tired didn't touch it. I was hollow, unravelling, drowning in a guilt that clung like damp fog. Daniel's face haunted me, his kind eyes, his laughter, memories of a love I'd betrayed for a fleeting thrill with James. Nights stretched long and merciless, the darkness a canvas for my torment. I'd sit by the window, rain tapping the glass in a mournful rhythm, watching streetlights flicker weakly below. The quiet was deafening, amplifying the ache in my chest. I'd see Daniel in my mind, his hands fixing my coffee, his smile lighting up our old life, and the guilt surged, a cold wave crashing over me. I'd destroyed him, shattered our trust, and for what? A spark with James that fizzled into nothing. I'd scroll my phone, staring at Daniel's name, my thumb hovering, but I never pressed call. He was gone, lost to me, and I'd driven him away. I tried to fill the void, cooking meals that tasted like ash, flipping through TV shows that grated on my nerves. Elmwood streets offered no comfort. I'd walk past shops and parks, invisible among strangers, their glances feeling like judgment. That's her, the one who ruined everything. It was my imagination, I knew, but it didn't ease the shame weighing me down. Friends called, their voices warm, but I dodged them, too drained to pretend. Alone, I'd curl up under a blanket, tears spilling hot and silent, each sob a confession of my failure. Therapy was my last resort. A dimly lit room smelling of lavender where I poured out my story. New Orleans, James, Daniel, the collapse. The therapist's voice was calm. "You need to forgive yourself, Christine. Move forward." I nodded, desperate to believe it, but the words rang empty. How do you forgive a betrayal that cost you everything? One night, I tried writing to Daniel. "I'm sorry, I was wrong," but the pen faltered, the paper tearing under my grip. I trashed it, my chest heaving. Apologies were useless now. He'd never hear them, never forgive me. Standing by the window, rain streaking down, I felt my isolation like a living thing, cold, relentless, wrapping around my heart. I'd wrecked my life, my marriage, my home, for a passion that left me with ashes. James was a memory, Daniel a scar, and I was alone, the apartment's walls closing in like a judgment. Tears fell, bitter and unstoppable, and I sank to the floor, the weight of my choices crushing me. This was my beginning, a hard, lonely path to face myself. I'd tell anyone, don't betray what's real. Cherish trust, it's all you have. My mistake stole everything, and now I had to live with the silence I'd made. Months have slipped by since I stood in that Elmwood apartment, rain weeping down the window, my world a shattered mosaic of my own making. The silence still lingers, a heavy cloak I wear each day, but it's quieter now, not softer, just less jagged. I've spent countless nights tracing the threads of my unraveling, New Orleans, James, Daniel, searching for meaning in the wreckage. The guilt hasn't faded, it's a dull ache. A permanent echo in my chest, but it's taught me something raw, something true. I've lost everything, my husband, my home, my peace, to a fleeting fire that left me scorched and alone, and in that loss I found a bitter clarity. Looking back, I see it all so vividly. The sultry pull of New Orleans, the spark with James that burned too bright the moment I let it consume me. I traded Daniel's steady love, his trust, his warmth, for a thrill that crumbled to dust. I broke a man who deserved my loyalty, shattered a life we'd built brick by brick, and for what? A passion that couldn't hold, a dream that faded in the harsh light of reality. Every choice I made was a step toward this solitude, a lesson carved in the scars I carry. I'd give anything to rewind, to clutch Daniel's hand tighter, to never let that city's whispers lure me astray. Now, in this quiet apartment, the rain still falls, a steady murmur against the glass, and I'm learning to live with what I've done. Therapy helps, those calm words urging me to forgive myself, but it's a slow, bruising climb. I can't undo the past, can't erase Daniel's pain or James's fading shadow, but I can carry this truth. Love built on betrayal is a house of cards, fragile and doomed. I've paid dearly for that knowledge, and it's a price I wouldn't wish on anyone. So here's my plea to you, whoever's listening, don't make my mistake. Hold fast to the ones who stand by you, the ones who weave your days with quiet, honest love. Don't let a fleeting rush, a glance, a whisper, steal what's precious. Trust is a fragile thread, easy to snap, impossible to reweave once it's gone. Cherish it, protect it, Because when it breaks, you're left picking up pieces that never quite fit again. I learned that the hard way, and I'm still piecing myself together, step by trembling step. To you watching this, I wish you strength, to choose wisely, to hold tight to what matters. May you find peace in the love you nurture, not in the ashes of what you've burned. May your heart stay whole, your nights free of this haunting quiet. Thanks for hearing my story. It's a heavy one, but if it spares you even a fraction of this ache, it's worth the telling. Take care and hold your loved ones close.